So my name is Mike Young, and I started cave diving around the late 90s, early 2000. We don't have a lot of caves in our area, so we started looking for caves that we could dive, and most of them are nasty, dirty water, and we ended up I ended up joining a dry caving grotto and finding out that they have caves with sumps in them. And so then I got into sump diving because that was all we really had. So then I made a trip or two to Florida and met a few other cave divers, and went to one of the NSS CDS workshops and realized that there's actually caves with clear water in them. I had a cave where I got buried alive in. That one was a crazy one. We went in this cave. At first they decided, so the initial drop into the cave is 180 feet on rope. And so you drop about 35 feet, and then you have to move over a few feet and then drop the rest of the way down. And so we had to learn how to use ropes, you know, to do this. So one of the dry cavers, he took us out in the barn and taught us how to climb rope and change over and descend rope, and so we get to the cave, and they told us we needed to go look at the sump first. So we're going to make this whole trip, you know, and not do any diving. So we get there, and so we dropped 2 ropes, and the old guy Smitty, he went first, and he dropped down, and he's standing on the little ledge, and I dropped down, and he asked me, he's like, "How are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, good, you know." And he's like, you know, you're doing all right. We don't want you to panic or anything." And I'm like, no, I'm all right. And he goes, "Because we can't really handle that right now." I said, "Well, okay." And he goes, "Okay, well, you're standing on a snake." And I looked down, and I couldn't see anything, and I turned my headlamp on, and sure enough, there's a copperhead coiled up right between my feet. And I was just standing there, and he's like, "What do you think we should do?" And I said, "Well, I think we need to kill it." And he said, "Well, we have some rope, and that's all we've got to work with." And I said, "Well, we can kick it off this ledge here and let it fall for, you know, 140 feet, you know." And he said, "Well, that'd probably just make it mad, and then we'll have to deal with it down there." So he said, "Why don't you kick it over in the corner there, and we'll just keep an eye on it." And I said, "Why don't you kick it?" And I jumped off the ledge. So we went down, we looked at Omega Lake and said, "Yeah, we can dive this." And it was about 4 hours of caving round trip. And it's like, it wouldn't be too bad. So we packed our dive gear up, and I had a small rebreather, and we didn't know much about caving, and we had them in these boxes, kind of like pelican case. And the Sherpas that volunteered that day kept calling them the dam boxes because they couldn't transport them through the cave very easily, you know. But anyway, we got down to Omega Lake, and we dropped in, and we laid line, and it went down pretty deep, 40, 50 feet deep, which is really unusual for a sump. And then it came back up to about 20 feet deep and went into a horizontal passage, and it was going for a ways, and it was about 3 foot high and about 15 feet wide, and we had about 20 foot of visibility. I looked up ahead, and I could see there's just this rock wall, and I was like, caves don't just end, you know, they go smaller, or, you know. Anyway, here's this rock wall, and the closer I get, I notice that it's a lot of round rocks, you know, about the size of small potatoes, just this whole wall of these small round rocks. There's a little V in the ceiling, you know, that was big enough to go through, and it goes up into another room. And so I went through into the next room, and there's another little V up going into another room. So I thought, well, I should do a tie-off here. So I stretched the line to make sure it was in the V correctly, and started to tie off. And right then Mike Wright came through, and then all of the rocks shifted and left us in this little room with this little tiny hole to go out. Because this rock slide was like, you know, 40 feet long. And they're all polished round. So when it's high flow, they just get tumbled in there. And then when it's low flow, they settle in and close it back down. So Mike was on open circuit and he just started digging. The problem was he was digging and pushing the rocks uphill, and then they just roll right back into the hole. And so I watched that for a minute and I thought, well, no, we need to dig the rocks from below and so we can get rid of them, you know. So I stuck my arm through the hole and started moving rocks. Well, they started rolling out from under me, you know, as I dug. And so I got a little more of me into the hole and dug some more, and pretty soon I got all of me where I was blocking the hole and not letting rocks roll down. It could dig out from under me and move a little further. So I did that until, and I got through. And then, of course, it closed up again. And so I grabbed Mike's arm and then I just started pulling on him and digging out from under him, you know, and dug him out. And then we didn't survey on the way out. Because we were just a little bit rattled.
I would imagine. That's pretty scary. And so did he freak out? Like, did he have enough air? Like, I mean...
No, he was pretty calm. He stayed calm. And we made it out with... We didn't have very big tanks anyway, but we weren't really that far in, a couple 100 feet. Yeah, so I surveyed it up to the rock pile and just took a shot through and said, okay, that's about 22 feet, and this is as accurate as you're getting. So, yeah, I've had a few close calls. One of my first ones, we were exploring a cave that's in a lake. When they built the dam, they flooded the cave. And so we found out these old topo maps, and we found where this cave was. And we went back in there, and we got back in a couple 100 feet, and it got tight, but it was like a hard clay that we could dig. And so we thought, well, we'll dig it out, you know. And so we would dig as much, you know, as far as we could reach. We were open circuit then, and back mount doubles, and so we were digging as much as we could, you know, but we couldn't quite get enough room, you know, so we thought, well, we'll go in there with side mount. And I'd seen Advanced Diver Magazine had a deal on the armadillo, you know, and how. Anyway, so we fixed us up some webbing and made us some little side mount harnesses and a couple of aluminum 80s hanging like a stage bottle, you know, and go back in there. And so I could get through the part we dug pretty easy, but there was a little ledge in there. And my chest could barely squeeze through, you know. And so I was feeling around behind me on the ceiling for something I could use for leverage to push my way through. And I got my heel on this little crack, and I pushed really hard, and I pushed through the tight spot, you know. And I thought, you know, if there's not a spot on the ceiling on the other side to push real hard to get back out, I might be in trouble here. Anyway, the visibility is gone because, you know, we stirred things up. And anyway, I laid line. And I went across the little room, and it pinched out, and we couldn't go any further. So I tied the line off. And I didn't realize that I'd laid the line in on the right-hand side, so I'm going to follow it with my left hand on the way out. So what I didn't realize is the line moved over in the hole. And so since I couldn't see anything, I got over there, and I got to where it started getting tight, and I found a little place that I could get my heel in, and I shoved really hard, and the hole was over here, and I was over here, and I shoved myself all right up into the crack in the silt. And I couldn't breathe. I was like, so I was like stir wiggling, trying to get myself loose. Finally, I backed back out, and I started feeling around. I was like, oh, okay, the opening's over here. So I moved over and came out pretty easy on that one. But that was my first side mount dive. Yeah, stuck myself really good. Well, there was the other time I was buried alive. We were, you know, diving this Blue Spring near Eureka Springs, Arkansas. And they gave us permission to come in and shoot a documentary and explore the cave. And we had accidentally made this comment that, you know, that they might increase the people coming to visit the spring because people might come to see what we're doing, you know. And the owner, she said, nope. She's like, I'm not going to make a penny off of you guys coming to dive here, because when one of you dies, I will have profited from it. And I'm like, what do you mean when one of us dies? And she goes, well, surely one of you is going to die doing this. And so I don't want to be, I don't want to profit from. So you can't come when we're open during business. So you can only come at night when nobody's around. I was like, well, but she let us in. So, but anyway, so we started off, and of course they had a drawing of what they thought from geologists and stuff, and somebody in history had gone and taken a rope with a weight and dropped it down to like 300 feet deep and all this. So right away we mixed up some, like 1550, and we're going to, in our big steel doubles, and we're going to go deep, and we get in there and we get about 20 feet deep, and there's a crack that's only like 16 inches wide. And so that was the end of that. Anyway, so we decided we needed side mount, and so we made us some stuff. We got dive right harness and some old jacket BCs, and made butt plates and welded some stuff up to hook the tanks to, and fixed up side mount. By the time we got to around 100 feet deep, we were at the fourth restriction, and they were gradually getting tighter. And so the fourth restriction is there's a gravel slope coming down about 30 feet, and it's all polished gravel, that gets rolled. And these were smaller. They were, but it goes through the fourth restriction, and we could see the fifth restriction down there, and it was really choked up. So we started pulling gravel out. So we spent months and months pulling gravel out, bags of gravel, and the problem was every time we take some gravel out, some more would just roll down the hill, So at one point we actually fixed up a vacuum dredge in a 2.5-inch pipe, and we were vacuuming the gravel out, and we could vacuum it about to the 70-foot level, and we put this big basket in there that would hold about a half a yard of gravel. And so we would vacuum it until the basket was full, and then I would go up and do my decompression while I vacuumed it out, and that guy went up to the top, and we vacuumed it out into the river. And so we did that for another month or two, and we thought, we would do about 5 dives per weekend, after hours, and then on Sunday we were closed, and we had all day Sunday. And so we got to the point where the gravel kind of quit rolling down about as fast, and we thought, well, I think we can get through there now. And so what we wanted to do really is see what was on the other side, because if we could just push the gravel further into the cave and not clog up the next restriction, that would be a lot easier than removing the gravel. And so we got all set up to do it, and I had a single aluminum 80 with an H valve, and we're at about 105 to 110 feet deep. And so we figured if everything went sideways and I was breathing really hard, we'd have 15 minutes worth of air. So we had some safety tanks there just in case. And so I'm pushing the tank ahead of me, and then the restriction was about 10 feet long. And when I got to the point where they couldn't pull me back out, Mike was going to grab my fins and do an okay signal with it. And if I could see into the next room and could turn around, I'd give him an okay back, and we would continue on. If I didn't think I could turn around, he was going to just pull me right back out. And so I was like, okay, good plan. So I had my tank, and I'm pushing it ahead of me, and I'm pushing gravel out, digging my way through. And so all of a sudden he gives me the signal. This is the point of no return, and I look, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure I could turn around, so I'm going to keep going. So I keep going, and I inch forward just a little bit more, and then all the gravel up on the slope released and came down. It just came down behind me. So I only had this much room. And so I was like, well, I got to continue on into this room to turn around if nothing else. Anyway, so I could move one arm. And so I'm digging in front of me. And once again, I would roll downhill with the gravel as I dug it out. So I got into the room, and I looked, and it was there was a nice little trough for it to all lay in. So we didn't have to worry about it choking up the next restriction. So I turned around and I was digging, I mean, and I got to where I thought I could get through, you know, and so also we had a piece of like rigid conduit that they were going to help pull me back out with also. So all of a sudden, here's that conduit, you know, comes and, you know, hit me in the head, and I'm like, oh wait, and so I grabbed hold of the conduit and I started digging sideways now and letting him pull me, and then he'd just pull it right out of my hand, and then I'd, you know, a few seconds later, here come the conduit again, and I had the gauges to the tank right in front of me, you know, and I could have looked if I wanted to, and I was like, nope, not going to worry about it. Just keep digging, just dig my way out, you know. Besides, if we were running low on time, they'd have been shoving a tank through. And so I was like, so I probably still have plenty of time. So anyway, I ended up digging my way back out. And so now that we know that we can just dump the gravel on the other side, we went down there with tools and just pushed gravel, you know. And so then the next weekend, we decided we would film what we had done the previous weekend so that we would have it for the documentary. And it's not going to collapse on us twice, right? You know? It did it again. Went back the next weekend and let it bury me again. So I was with the U.S. deep caving team in Puerto Rico. And they were trying to connect the entire Rio Incantada system, and it has 5 different openings, and they were trying to, you know, fill in the gaps between these different cave entrances, you know. And so our job was to dive in on the resurgence where all the water's coming out. This is an underground river, basically. It goes through a lot of dry cave. Matter of fact, it totaled up to like 23 kilometers when the map was completely finished. But they'd had people like Wes Skiles and Roberta Swicegood and had worked on this map back, you know, 30, 40 years previous to this. Anyway, so we needed to lay line in the resurgence up to the dry cave. And so we had our part done right away, you know, like a couple days. And it was like a 20-day trip, you know. Anyway, so Jose realized that it's flowing in like 1 cubic meter per second out of the cave system, but the resurgence is flowing out like 2 cubic meters per second, you know. He's like, so there's a contributary in there somewhere in the underwater part. And could you find that? And so we started searching and we found this one. And of course, there was a lot of gravel in there. And I told Jose, I'm like, we need to get a garden hoe or something to drag this gravel out so we can clear it faster, you know. And we weren't successful in getting through that. And so he says, well, I've got this other system that we need you to survey the downstream part. And so we go over there and we're driving down this mountain road that's, you know, just one little lane road, and all of a sudden he stops this big 4-wheel drive and he's like, here's the cave. And we look, and between the road and the mountain, there's this little hole that's, I mean, barely big enough to get in, you know. And he goes, yeah, you go down about 25 feet and then you'll see for sure downstream. And so I had a rebreather, and Brennan was on open circuit, and we get down there and it was like whitewater. I mean, it was flowing. Anyway, we surveyed downstream like 700 feet or so, and there was a restriction there, and you could tell that the water was speeding up. And I'm like, you know, we got to go. We don't want to get pulled through that and caught. And so we start working our way back out, and you know, it's like Little River on a heavy flow. I mean, it was pull, fight. So we're about halfway out, and Brendan gets my attention. We pulled into an eddy to rest, you know, and he gets my attention, and he shows me his gauges. He's got like 200 PSI in each tank, and that's it. And we're only like halfway out. I'm like, crap, you know. And so I was like, okay, you just hold on to my crotch strap and get behind me. And I have a rebreather. I've got pretty much unlimited oxygen. So, and I'll pull both of us out. And so he's like, okay. And so, and I was like, and just in case, I think I had 40 cubic foot tanks. Anyway, I took the long hose to my 40. I was like, matter of fact, you breathe this one completely empty and then go back to your, anyway, so then I pulled him out. But yeah, that was another one where if we'd have been on open circuit, both of us would have died because, you know, we wouldn't have been able to fight the current to get back out.
Hey everyone! Thanks for watching our latest episode all the way to the end. Hit that subscribe button now so you won't miss our next episode.